today?
we can. That would be quite the turn of events.
Have you ever ran the speaker test from StreamYard?
No. What does it do?
It is hilarious. They like made their own song and it's singing to you about testing. It's like testing speakers on your StreamYard stream. It is top tier. It is.
That is great. Nope, haven't geeked on that, but that's awesome. Just want to make sure the buttons work.
Buttons.
At least the music's good, right?
Yeah. How fast can I pull up the PowerShell documentation? Am I not logged in?
PowerShell. All right, welcome everyone. We will get started in about another minute or two. Until then, enjoy the jams. It's the pre-show.
We feverishly figure out all the things we potentially missed leading up to it.
Yeah, not that we didn't have like 6 weeks to generate content.
Hey, at least we have a schedule for going forward now.
I know. We showed up. That's all that matters. Is we showed up.
That is big true. There is. Oh, I did it. It exists in the .NET framework.
Framework. Got it. That makes sense. So it is a Lulbin.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's an API within the publish, and then methods, then GAC install, and there's of course GAC remove.
All right. Good to know. Next time. Cool, we'll give one more minute. I have to click some more buttons. Otherwise, hope everybody's having a good Friday. stop staring at other things. All right. How do we get going here? We got to push buttons.
There we go.
All right. Let me
Gotta add our faces.
Yeah, I got to push more buttons. Howdy. Okay.
Welcome.
Excellent. We're here. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. It didn't click until I started seeing Friday the 13th themes floating that today was the 13th.
Oh, I should.
I know.
Do we have time to rename the episode then?
I mean, it is IIS-sassins today.
Yeah, it's fine. I guess we can go with it.
Yes. Oh, we got a pretty fun agenda today. We have talk about some IIS components. Hopefully everyone knows what those are. We'll jump into some new atomic tests and check out all kinds of atomics, look at some fun little detections. And this time I did not forget mitigations, because we always forget mitigations. There's just too much fun to be had. And then, yeah, pumped. Short, who are we? Because you're always here for us. Yeah, my name is Michael Haig. I'm a senior threat researcher at Splunk. And yeah, we've been in this industry, I think 10, 12 years now. Started from the base of tech support, fixing dot matrix printers. Now here I am kind of story. Otherwise, I enjoy building out new atomics, researching threats, shipping stuff, and doing atomics on a Friday.
Well, I think you forgot the big component, which is co-creator of Atomic Red Team.
That's
more of just a modest thing, but I'll pitch it for you. I'll shill it for you.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Right on. I'm Paul Michaud. I'm principal incident handler, Red Canary. I've been in, I don't know how long, many years, probably too many at this point. Started in help desk, went into a traditional security analyst role, SOC analyst, and then over here as a incident handler, and as one of the core maintainers of Atomic Red Team, along with a great team of other folks, including Mike. And just enjoy ripping tests and threats and talking about them, figuring out how we can better detect, prevent, and stop cyber threats in the cyber world.
Cyber FAA. So today we've titled this IIS-sassins because this is a really cool topic on IIS modules. Why is it important? And so just to kind of like semi-level set what we're talking about, IIS, which is the Microsoft version of like Apache or Nginx, is the web hosting application, right? You can host little websites, happens to run Exchange, maybe SharePoint on-prem, things like that. I tried to Google how popular it is out on the interweb. I think it's obviously not near like Apache, but obviously IIS is practically everywhere and typically always found internally at an org, and or being hosted, under someone's desk on some server that's a critical app that has to be on the internet that you map the port to the internal LAN and all that. Not trying to name and shame. May have happened. And so what usually happens, right, is adversaries will pop these servers. The application is, poorly maintained, not patched, things like that. A shell will drop, and that's when you start to see your behaviors. Oops. And so that might include persistence, which is sort of what you're seeing now, like these stealthy persistence using modules, IIS extensions or modules. And the most common thing we always see is the post-exploitation, command or PowerShell spawning. And then with using these types of modules, we can persist enough to where it's an extension of the application. Say you host a credit card processing app on IIS. These extensions can act as a way to sniff that traffic or capture it and then exfiltrate that off. So it's pretty cool, and probably not. It's one of these topics that's starting to kind of rise up and starting to pick up. So I dropped the articles, the two from Microsoft here, which is talking about IIS extensions, kind of quietly opening up, these back doors, the evolution of web shells, things like that. And then this top one is from, I think, Malwarebytes, and I thought that was, good way to put it, as they are on the rise. And this is all last year. So they're very, very stealthy. I think that if you were a hands-on incident responder and you were doing a lot of website IIS investigations, you probably have seen these used over the years. I think it's just becoming more common now as a great way to steal and persist long-term.
So I feel most people, when developing even just a standard website, are going to use some form of a Linux-based web server, right? Like you mentioned, Apache or Nginx. So you have things like Tomcat. But are there other applications out there that just default use IIS in the Windows world? Like the one that jumps out is Exchange, and I think SharePoint is definitely core of it. I'm sure there's other parts of it. So is there a reason why we're potentially seeing this uptick? Is it because it's a combination of Exchange attacks with it, or SharePoint-based attacks from a initial access exploitation and then using these IIS modules? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any Microsoft app is using, not all of them, but like if you think of like Link and or internal team servers and things like that, SharePoint Exchange on-prem, they're still using IIS. And a lot of third-party apps, when I worked at a medical device company, we used IIS to just host like a kind of like an image sharing site too. So it's just common. I mean, it's built in, it's native to the OS. So I think a lot of orgs will just kick that up, spin it up. I think why adversaries are moving to it slowly, we'll see more, I'm sure, as folks start to look into this, we'll start to see more. But I think the reason why they're going to it is for that stealth persistence. And they're getting there via, most likely currently, on-premise Exchange using proxy shell or proxy not shell, things like that. I think that's why we're seeing it now in at least the last year and a half, 2 years.
Right on.
I guess the last year and a half, then it wouldn't be 2 years because we haven't even hit the end of 23 yet.
Close enough.
Yeah. I put a little like defender thing here, why do we care kind of thing. Like, so obviously as defenders, we need to understand how adversaries abuse IIS, how to find IIS modules. This was completely new to me. I was like, I don't even know what an IIS module is when I started digging into this. Simulating their tradecraft related to, either installing modules or, testing out with a sample extension or something like that. Like, how can we simulate this? What are the commands needed to install new modules? Some of it's new. Some of it was new to me. I definitely didn't dig in enough to these things other than just saying like, yeah, go after this, command, like app command or something. Like before this, I knew app command, but I didn't know what it actually could do. So that was kind of neat. Understanding behaviors from IIS when shells do drop. And then I had to put the mitigation line in there, how do we ultimately prevent these things from happening? Because I think that's kind of the most important thing. Yeah, so references here. I don't know, Paul, if you want to drop those in chat so they're forever embedded.
Absolutely.
But starting out at the top, July last year, Microsoft dropped this blog, the first one here on IIS extensions being used. Now, this one I think wasn't so maybe like well read. I don't know if like I didn't even see it. The one that caught my attention was the second one back in December, which if you say last year, it was like 4 weeks ago, literally. a month ago now. This one actually goes into what CrowdStrike blogged on, which is what CrowdStrike calls ICE Apple, and it's a IIS post-exploitation framework. And so the CrowdStrike one's probably the most interesting, and the Microsoft from December was like a follow-up, like here it is kind of thing. But the CrowdStrike report goes into detail of each of the modules that they installed and what each module did. So there's a lot of like money to be made, I guess you could say, in going after IIS modules like this, which makes it extremely sneaky. When I was Googling around, especially like the Malwarebytes blog, they were talking about how Malwarebytes was like a horrible reference. Actually, I'm sorry, SecureList, this last one here, wasn't the best reference. It was very much just like, there's this new thing called Session Manager, and it's an IIS backdoor. Like, there was no how they did it, or anything. Like, what were they popping to get there? Like, it was just straight up like, here's some cool modules, like mic drop, and walked out of the room, And so, but it's still an interesting reference because it does talk about this potential, yet another framework called Session Manager that was installing modules. So, but anyway, back to ICE Apple, probably the most detailed one, which I think is what made Microsoft respond with how to go and hunt down modules more. The other neat thing that Paul and I both played with is the MDSEC's IIS RAID module. Now, this is a simple way to build it, and then you can import it with some of the ways we'll show you here in a minute into IIS. And you have the ability then to set up like a little Python listener and communicate back and forth with a module. But yeah, those are our little references. Got our links. And so when I started digging into this, and probably the same for you too, Paul, right? Did you know this about native and managed? I didn't.
It came up during it, but beforehand, never knew about it.
Yeah, so that's how I felt too. I was like, I don't even know what the difference is here. And when I was goofing off in IIS, looking at the modules themselves, I noticed they had names like managed and native, and what does that even mean? And so I ended up finding myself in a dark place on Microsoft's website, looking at IIS component module crap, and I was like, okay, what's the TLDR, right? Like, so here's like the short gist. The native module, which is why it has a red box, is because that's what we're focusing on, and this is what we're seeing in the wild right now. Native modules are going to typically be a DLL. And what I'm seeing from adversaries is they're naming them very good, like for instance, session manager.dll, and they're importing that into IIS. A lot of them by these adversaries look very legitimate. That's probably the most like scary part about it is if you haven't looked at IIS modules before on your 60 server IIS fleet out there, you may not understand like some of these names or where they're coming from or why they're there. And that's kind of the hard part about this. It's very much like our driver talk services and things like that we've spoken of. It's like if you don't inventory, you don't see what the differences are. It's really hard to kind of pull these things apart and what's new and whatever. And then so native modules can be installed through the IIS admin tool in the UI, kind of like your typical server admin side. A new way, which I'm calling it new because it's completely new to me, but I couldn't find much info, was installing modules through PowerShell. There's a couple commandlets. And then the most common way, which we probably all know of, is through app command. And so anytime you install a new module, it goes into a config file under inetserv config, and the file is applicationhost.config. It'll be under what's called global modules. And I'll show this file in a minute. Managed modules are a little bit different. It's more like compiled code for that particular application, and it sits inside of a web.config for like that app pool. But it also goes into the application host config file as well. Not going to spend much time on managed. From what I know so far on my Googling, I haven't seen an adversary use a managed module yet. Good or bad. Again, it's very subjective to those who are reporting on it and whether they actually investigate and determine if it's managed or native visibility, right? Whew. So the short, I wanted to at least give the screenshots before we do demos of all these things. How do you find them, right? So we talked about the IIS manager on the left. You can see I had like a bunch of atomic red teams ones here for you, and loading from that non-standard path, the C temp. And you can see the IIS backdoors down here too, the C temp. That's the IIS RAID module from MDSec. And then you can see the rest. Most of the modules that are native are coming out from the INET serve path. And then the managed are the more compiled ones. They'll look more like a DLL type name or something like that. Not a DLL name, more of like a system call name, I guess you could say. So that's kind of like the biggest piece when you're looking in the UI. Now in the command line, I have app command on the top right. App command, you just say list modules and it just like pumps them all out for you. And then on PowerShell, which I did not know about this, and it took me like probably a solid day to find these modules, these commandlets, and that was a hip hip hooray if you remember that one. Yeah. So go ahead.
These I think it's interesting to note is that when you install IIS, the services components on like a server, these then get added. So the app command and the Git web global and the PowerShell module associated with it are tied to the installation of IIS. So it's not like if you just install server 2019 or 2022, they're not going to be there unless you explicitly install it. So seeing these, depending on your environment, if you don't run IIS, you should not have these. So that's also another interesting thing. And they're also, again, buried. And you can see it in that top picture. It's INET serve, and then that's the root directory for some of these administrative tools, and the PowerShell command lists are also installed there. There's actually another location that I should have noted because I found somewhere else that drops a PowerShell module for IIS management. And I forgot to do that. So I'll find it.
And then the bottom right is the same thing, right? It's just like app command, it's PowerShell's command, like get web global module. When I found this, it was like, Paul and I knew there was a way to do it in PowerShell. We just didn't know the commandlet, and it took a hot minute to truly figure out, what it was and where it was and all that. But same output path and the name. Yeah. So looking at the newer December Microsoft blog, they call out that the whole blog is like literally how to go and hunt and or get more data and do better as far as IIS monitoring goes. And so this one was completely new to me. And they're basically like, if you want to find more IIS evil, you need to enable advanced logging. And I'm like, why isn't that enabled by default if I'm in server, web admin here? And so literally you just run the last line, which is enabling it, which is the IIS configuration operational log. Once that's enabled, you can ship it to whatever source, wherever you want to take it. I created a gist for this. If you're using Splunk, it's as simple as setting up in inputs, just grab that new operational log, put it in an index, give it a source type, whatever, and go from there. And so that's under my gist. I don't know if we have that link. You probably have the link.
Yeah, I can grab that.
Okay.
I got that.
Thank you, sir. So there's that. That gist will get you started if you're using Splunk. It's probably similar for any other product, just collect that event log and now you have new data. This blog does show configuration changes and whatnot to like the application host config file, things like that. I believe it gives module names being added, and I'll double check in a little bit. But the other thing I did, and you'll probably see it here on the bottom of the screenshot for the inputs conf. And so this is a PowerShell script that's using get web global module. When I was working on this, I was like, well, what if I don't have a decent way to inventory modules, right? Mm-hmm. And because a lot of that's key to just understanding modules and what's in my environment. And so I found this in the inputs, being able to do this. So it will run this once a day, and you can run it however often you want. It tosses that source type on it, throws it in the index. It's just natively, it will run this in PowerShell, and then standard out, that whole thing will go into Splunk. And then you can Splunk all the modules on your whole fleet and see what's going on out there. And I mentioned the paths. when you're hunting in these modules, most of them will be in INET serve. So if there's some that are in other paths, those might be of interest at this point, right? Maybe it's a third-party app. I don't know. I don't have a huge enough fleet to determine that. But if maybe it's a third-party application loading weird modules in their location, or it's coming out of CTemp and it's named Session Manager.
Yeah, I think when you first discovered that you could just run the script like that within an inputs conf for the Splunk forwarder, that was kind of like a huge win because it gave you some different data. And yeah, there's different. If you're thinking of like EDR or sysmon and looking for the DLLs that are loaded at that point in time, the Microsoft blog does show an interesting KQL command that allows you to specify the process and then at the different timestamps a DLL was loaded, right? Because when IIS starts, it's going to load everything up at once. But if a DLL is loaded after it's already been running, those timestamps are going to be different when those are loaded. So you can actually then start to do a diffing. But this can at least, again, kind of augment some of that in that aspect. And I thought that that bottom section of the PowerShell command was really slick because that opens up a lot of different doors, not just for this aspect or use case, but tons of different ones if you don't have like specific logging, but you can run a command and just ingest it. That's really sweet.
Yeah, that's a good point on the module loads. And again, like you can flip that if you're looking like in your inventory for non-standard paths outside of INET serve, it's the same thing for mod loads. Why is W3WP loading from CTemp ADLL? Like what's going on, right? And yeah, that's a solid point. We should write these down as we re-review the video. So that
there's always stuff notes that comes out before we start going in.
These are good notes. Somebody should write something about this.
Blog.
Yeah, you're like, you can go hammer that out. So yeah, we have 4 atomic tests related to this today. So T1505 004 is your app command stuff and your new web global module. T1562 is something from a couple blogs where adversaries have disabled the HTTP logging. This was another thing I dug into a bit as well. It's related to IIS components because you're disabling the HTTP logging piece. And then bonus points, I'll get to that in a sec. 1505 004. It's as simple as this, right? App command, install my new module, give it a cool name, tell it the path of my DLL. Now, this is what I added to Atomic Red Team in the PR, maybe not AOF, but you'll see the def doc and all that. Similar, there's test number 2, which is going to say, do it again, but do it in PowerShell natively. These both have cleanup commands, which will remove this. So you don't have to like deal with weird IIS modules in your environment that at least, you did. 1562, same thing. I actually found, which I thought was really, really cool. App command will disable the logging, but so will this other one, set web configuration property. You literally tell it, disable, native in PowerShell, disable logging. I was like, that's awesome. That's yet another one I haven't really seen anybody talk about. So kind of like between these 2 PowerShell commandlets, they're pretty lit. Bonus points. I did not add this as an atomic. So of all the viewers watching right now, if you want to get your first atomic PR or second
T-shirt
of many, get a free shirt, get some stickers. This will do the same. It's just set item property, tell it the path, give it the name, and disable logging. And it'd be the inverse to cleanup if you want to do it in the cleanup as well. So that should be in our notes too.
Yeah. So if you want free stuff, copy that bottom line and then just add the cleanup command and submit the PR. We will YOLO approve it, and congrats, you win.
Yep.
Yes, we can. We can do it live. It's not playing.
Yes. I know. I noticed when it imports, it doesn't do the automation.
All right, we'll have to figure that out later.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's the GIF is playing on our screen, so
yeah,
you can all picture it.
Yes. All right. Yeah. Any questions or anything, Paul, or any thoughts? words, phrases?
Oh, I tried to deep dive the app command binary and understand the images that it loads and the functions that it uses in order to register the DLLs. In particular, the PowerShell command is built on .NET, so there's actually a .NET command. It's GAC install, and there's another one that is built in the .NET framework that supports that. App command is slightly different. I didn't actually get to finish out and track it. It actually got really convoluted, and I got lost, and the symbols didn't make any sense either. So there's probably some smart REs out there that can probably help track down explicitly where those APIs are, because another way to think about it is, while we can target app command, what if we identify the specific API call that can be leveraged, and then in particular a custom binary is executed, or that API is called directly to do it versus using that. So we're taking a step deeper as opposed to just trying to key off of a specific process. So hopefully track that down a little bit sooner, because I think it's going to be interesting, especially if we continue to see IIS being abused with these types of DLLs and modules.
Yep. For sure. Thanks, man.
We do it live.
Yeah. Figure I wrote notes, and I guess we could share these somewhere because somebody.
Yeah. Well, we'll put them in the GitHub.
Yeah, the GitHub.
The GitHub.
So yeah, I kind of briefly walk through the Microsoft blog here. This is from the Defender research team. This is the July blog. It's again, these are very covert, hard to find. They hide deep. This stuff is like, it's mind blowing that it's talked about like this, right? It's almost like the new APT, minus you don't use the word APT. Targeting Exchange servers, and look at the names, right? Like app web logo image handler, things like that. Like, it's amazing because every time I've seen one of these, they always look pretty non-discrete. It's not obvious. This isn't like IIS backdoor and things like that. And then this one I remember does break down how modules look and work. How do you create them?
Yeah, go back up just a little bit.
Oh, yep.
Right. So that where it starts with the bold.
Got it.
So that talks about the PowerShell API that it's going to use, and then actually gives the explicit PowerShell command. So if you wanted to, again, submit another atomic, you could use that PowerShell that they put in the screenshot, test it out, just make sure there's some cleanup commands in there. But that's another interesting use case. And there's some variances that you could also do on there if you're interested in kind of playing around with it or digging in deeper. But again,
yep, that's a solid one. Yeah, I might have to get a play with that one. Yeah, and so they talk about how this. I'm pretty sure this one is all about an adversary. So they're saying like this particular adversary used GAC-util or GAC, plus they used app command to install their module. And again, this is all very similar to what our atomic tests look like. This is the GAC-util version with the -i, which we have not yet shipped a atomic on for GAC-util. Remember I mentioned two different config files. Here's your web config and then your application host config. And I'll show that in a second. And then once it's registered, you can definitely see it in the IIS modules within the manager. But yeah, I guess this one was through proxy shell. And so yeah, they go through talking about cred access and how they did all their other stuff. That's a great blog to start with. The second one, this is the one that was in the response to the ICE Apple. This is from Mystic and December 12th. This one goes into, here's the ICE Apple report, all the different pieces, like how the actual, the modules kind of speak and talk, event triggers. But then it gets into the good stuff. They talk, remember this one's all specifically on hunting and or detecting. So they do break down like W3WP, all the different child procs, what to look for. This log, which I believe we looked into, right, Paul, they had a specific ETW log that they called out in here.
Yeah, so ETW, event tracing for Windows. There are two for .NET. It's .NET and then .NET Rundown. So if you run logman query and then pipe into select string with a pattern of .NET, it'll tell you specifically the two. They're listed. and they'll kind of provide some of this again for assembly loading, some interesting data points, and I think it's a few EDRs are actually leveraging that particular ETW provider for some of their ETW analysis, or excuse me, .NET analysis from the ETW provider.
Yeah, I remember we looked at this. I thought they called it out, but maybe I'm skipping through it too quick here.
From that.
Here's our advanced IIS logging that we mentioned. This is the piece that started shipping, and this is what it looks like, in the actual event log. They do tell you, like I mentioned, the module name here, and then like which app it was applied to. And a little side note there. Again, this is what it looks like. Let me skip down. So then they talk about, listing out your commands or listing out your modules. Very obviously everything we talked about here. Something I was interested in too. We think you're just mentioning this too, Paul, about event ID 50. Event ID 50 just literally is like, hey, your config was updated. Other than that, I can't tell you much more. It's like, okay, all right, chug along.
Depending on activity and how often configurations are updated within your application pools, that could be viable to at least give you the starting point. And again, if adversary changes tactics or techniques, then certain activity that you would rely on in some of these other event logs may not be there, but at least it can give you a starting point. But again, it's a very generalized, it's truly the quote unquote informational type log that Microsoft likes to spit out sometimes.
Yep. This is the W3WP loading a malicious DLL. And obviously they have like an EDR and or like what you see in this screenshot from their tool here. You'll see it comes out of www.root bin proxy shell DLL. So it would be a module installed in a non-standard path. And if you were inventorying, you would see, DLLs, on your inventory and in your module loads as well, coming from two different places. So definitely very powerful to go after that route. It's just could be, certain EDRs collect modules. Some of them reduce the amount that they do collect, things like that. So you just have to kind of play your game. Was this here's the ETW stuff. We just happened to jump the blog. These are the event IDs and everything like that. I think we got this data, didn't we? We played with
rundown.
It. Yeah.
So the first one is Microsoft Windows .NET runtime. And then the second one, the one that they're leveraging, is the .NET runtime rundown. So there's the two for your .NET ETW providers.
Yes. Anyway, I'll probably stop there because that's about it, I guess. But it just talks about process creation off of W3WP, and then module installation with app command and gacutil, which, we failed to throw that one.
The interesting piece is if you look in the image above, actually two above, one more above. Module IL path. So when an assembly is reflectively loaded into an already running process, you can see the difference that in the case of Sharphound, there's no path associated. And in the case of a legitimate one, that's showing that it's loading off of disk, right? And then same with the assembly flags that they're specified for 0. So those are some interesting points to keep out for, depending if your EDR or methods of log collection can provide that. If you're just ingesting pure ETW logs, which you can, highly recommend. In specific cases, those are good points to key off of.
Yes. Would love to get those. I'm not going to go crazy on the Ice Apple one, but
it's a big one.
It's a worthy read. I think you said it was 22 pages, and I think the highlight of it is that they do break down each of the modules that this adversary used, which is really cool to see because again, it's like a framework, and their modules were literally called App Web IC. Like, if you're not inventorying and you see app webs, maybe it looks completely normal, right? Like that's the hardest part here is digging into all of these. But
it was really good write-up and some really interesting components from each one and kind of the updates that were made and applied and kind of throughout the evolution of this is really fascinating. So definitely a good read and a lot of key points in that credential dumper aspect.
Yeah,
you're looking into as a separate aspect, which is really interesting as well from that technique standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, the sidebar here, and I guess this could have been our mini AF today, was digging into the credential dumper piece here. It's not your normal Mimikatz XE, right? This is using syskey, bootkey type stuff, and I am really interested in generating an atomic for this. There's a couple PowerShell scripts out there that will do this for us, but I really want to find a way to do it kind of with an atomic outside of maybe just bringing in that PowerShell script, but I probably just will. Either way, this is a really interesting one. Yeah, do both and do live. Let me see, go back to my notes. All right, so I'm pretty sure I already have this log enabled, I think, but I'm gonna run it for funsies because boom, doesn't hurt. It doesn't even tell you. Let's look at the IIS modules in IIS, and to get there is literally go into your IIS manager and then go to modules, and then poof, they're all here. Like I mentioned in the other screenshot, you'll see your native and managed ones in here. And most all of them, will have, most of them, like your native ones will have directory paths that they're in and things like that. Here's our backdoor one, things like that. It's all fun and games. And you can actually remove these live. Like you're just like, oh, get this out of my server. Like just kick that stuff out. And I think you can add your managed modules here, which remember I mentioned it's a little bit different than just having a native module on disk. And you're like, well, just go find my DLL and drop it in here. And yes, you can. So those are pretty simple. Here's one right here.
And
boom.
I didn't actually validate this, but when you do remove the module, chances are you're probably going to have to restart the app pool because you need to kill the IIS process workers in order for to basically dump out if that DLL is already loaded, right? If that module is loaded, it's not just going to yeet it out of memory because it's already loaded. So you probably have to restart the app pool. I don't know. I don't know enough about IIS web servers.
Okay, so I just removed it. I removed all my Metasploit ones. This is the application host config. I'm going to refresh. And yeah, it looks like they might still be here. So I wonder where it removed it. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I didn't dig into that piece enough to spell it correctly first. This is it. Okay. But yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
We'll find it later.
And then, yeah. Okay. And so back to our demo. Let's just list the modules. It is a pain to keep typing the path to app command. So if you are, I'm telling you, it's sometimes just faster to literally just put it in a variable.
I wound up when I was testing just CDing right into the iNet serve and just leaving the terminal running there.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
Add it to your environment variables or your environment paths and just reload your terminals.
Yeah, you should. That's probably the better option.
You'd think when you install it, they do it for you because, like, as a server manager, like, I don't want to have to remember like where these paths exist. I should just be able to run the command and call it a day.
I know. Yeah, I know. All right, so I just installed our Atomics on a Friday module. Boom, it's down here now. And if you crack open our app config, you'll see it there too. Peekaboo.
I think an interesting point here is that, as you can see, when you add these modules, they get added last to the list. So if you're looking, you're like, hey, this thing's first, like this has got to be like, it's not newest first, it's oldest first. The things that are potentially default are going to be at the top, and the interesting things are probably going to be closer towards the bottom of the list, depending on, again, activity. But without a big pool sample, it's hard to just say like these ones are the default, but baselining is important in these cases.
And how, I think that's part of your hunt of how often is app command running to install new modules, and you may find it might not be ever in your environment, especially on actual web servers in your org. You may not see them. The other thing I had an idea on was I started writing a very basic PowerShell script that got the hash of your application host file or your web config. grab the hash and then compare the hash to, or just kind of like run it daily, like, and compare it, like, yep, hasn't been modified, and just kind of like constantly checks. You could run it daily kind of thing. Like,
Like a
oh, wait a
file
minute.
integrity monitor.
Exactly. Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a neat
You could
perspective.
toss, because what in my brain, I was thinking, I was like, if I was an adversary, what if I just modify this and either maybe randomly reboot the server or wait until it reboots or restarts or something, loads it up, but nobody saw like the app command run, right? Like it's just the inverse of it all.
Yeah.
That's
I didn't even think about that. It's a really good perspective.
Yeah,
How
probably worth
often?
a
'Cause that
test.
file shouldn't probably change.
It shouldn't.
Be my guess.
It shouldn't change until someone adds a new module or something. I have no idea. Yeah. Next bit. So that was the whole app command installing a module. I'm just going to flip to the PowerShell version of it. And so similar output. Obviously, this was more of like your IIS looking kind of method, but your PowerShell one with the get web global module, get your name and your image. So the directory path or the path to it, which you can see all of our evilly looking ones are down here. And with that, I already unregistered our Atomics on a Friday module. So I'll re-register it again. There it is. And then do another get, and then boom, it's alive. And if you, come back in here and refresh, I'm sure we'll
Now,
see.
the DLL that's part of the Atomics, what behavior happens if that DLL gets loaded or when you execute it?
Nothing. It's actually just a default DLL that comes with INET serve. It's like just a simple one. I figured I chose it because if you're running IIS, I wanted to make sure that it was everybody could use it kind of thing.
37 calculators start popping off.
Yes.
The fleet.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You always have to watch for your calcs on IIS web servers. That's probably the more important topic here. Otherwise, remove it. Same thing. And everybody is obviously here for actually kicking off the Atomics, right? Like, we wouldn't
should
be
actually
here
maybe run
that.
Atomics.
Maybe we should do an Atomic. Just trying to make it easy here. I'm gonna watch my copy paste skills.
Copy paste live.
And yeah, this thing always gets hung up. Oh, never mind.
It did.
It worked faster. My copy paste. So remember our 1505s, 004s are the app command ones, and the set global in PowerShell. So you just run that. It'll do its magic, and then cleanup will do its cleanup. And then let's just run test number 2, which is our PowerShell version. And so it's adding that new module. And then your cleanup will run again. And I think this is the one that hangs a little bit for some reason, but it worked a second ago. And then our 1562 is going to disable all the logging. Yeah, come on. Until then,
maybe
fill the void.
Start playing music.
Yes, right. We're just gonna hang out until this finishes. Oh, there it goes. Okay, and so then going to our HTTP, disabling the logs for HTTP. Same thing. We're just gonna use app command, set that config, and we'll just run that. It's all done. It's like, thank you so much. Same thing in PowerShell this time. It's like, yay. And then don't forget your bonus points. For those of you out there following along at home, get that PR in. Get the shirt.
And remember, it's easy to, when using the invoke framework, to use a hash table to create custom parameters. So when you see in kind of Mike's example at the top where you see the red, you can override those default ones. So if you want to try something different, kind of mimic something similar to the reports, change it up, make sure that you're not just keying off of specific file names, but kind of detect some of the behavioral aspects of it. It's an important thing to remember as well. I think a lot of people potentially forget is that you can absolutely change the defaults. You don't have to modify the YAMLs. You can just create a variable as a hash table and then pass it as a parameter, which is input args or custom input args.
It's dash prompt for input args. I have it on the screen.
Yep.
So yeah. Well, yes, I know what you mean. Yeah, inside the YAML, you would 1505. Yeah, input arguments. And then in this particular case, like Paul was saying, I have two of them in here, the actual module, IIS module name, and then the DLL path. So if you're like, I want to be Leet Haxor, or load my own DLL because Mike's idea was horrible.
I want calculator pop, so you build your own IIS module that pops calculator.
Yeah.
You could absolutely do that.
Goes and does that for you.
So,
yeah. It's very
flexible.
flexible.
That's potentially forgotten about is that you can A, do it on the fly as a PowerShell variable and pass it, or B, prompt just like you showed.
Yep. Yeah, this is awesome, especially when you're working with atomics that have input args. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Pro tip,
I don't know
if you can use input args in your atomic tests, put them in there.
Yes, do that on your set item property right there. That'll be money. You get 2 shirts. That's what we'll tell Donahue to do, is that the person gets 2.
That's right. The more input args you put, the more shirts you'll get.
Yes.
Brian's probably watching this and losing.
I know. He's like, no. He's going to be negatively responding on the chat.
Waiting for my DMs to come flying in now.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome. So on the detection side, I'll share some screenshots. I'll share what we did at Splunk as far as the content that I shipped. This is on the Research Splunk site under the IIS Components page. I shipped a bunch of things covering, new modules being added with app command, new modules being added with the, set web global module, things like that. Looking for, HTTP logging being disabled either via app command or PowerShell. Overall, I feel like there's quite a bit of content to be written. I also went after a script block logging from PowerShell, looking for, the usage of like web global module, the commandlets being ran. I think that's very powerful to go after. And then also, we mentioned using that inside that inputs.conf to grab everything from listing out the modules and grabbing it and splunking it. So I'm just going to flip over to Splunk here. This is, I'm just using 4688 from Windows here, which is just like that process command line stuff. So it's just very simple, just look for app command using install or module and just listing out the command line. So you can see, let's see if it pulled in the new stuff. My server's kind of laggy. But yeah, so you can see install modules, and it's just doing, that exact thing we were just testing. And then, so that's just app command. And again, many orgs may not ever use it. Obviously, I'm in a kind of a test environment, so there's not much. I don't have like 500 servers hanging out, but this may never be used, right? Like it's one of those things to just go and find and see what's happening in your environment. Check out that app command. And this is the event code 29 that I just could not get to work. So it's just done. I got a screenshot. This is the PowerShell inputs from that comp file. It's literally listing out all those modules. The cool thing, right, is you can say, not in certain paths like inet serve and things like that. Or for your organization, you may have an app that has to use a module from a weird path. You could just exclude it, kind of filter that out. But typically, as you can see, most everything being loaded is from inet serve and the .NET framework. All the evils. I don't even know where this one came from. And then
spelled wrong too.
I know, it's everywhere. Oh, so didn't even talk about this. So when I first started geeking out on IIS modules, I was like, does it just load any DLL? Because I was curious, right? And I knew it didn't based on some blogs or based on the one Microsoft blog, but I was like, why not give it a try, right? So I just compiled the simple Metasploit DLL. That's why you see it everywhere in my data. I actually found that there's an event code, 2282, where it's like, yo, this DLL is struggling to load into IIS, and you should probably fix this. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And so it dumps this 2282 out, telling you you have a failing module. So this might be powerful to just go and look for in your environment. It's in the application one event log. If you're not logging it somewhere, maybe it's local, but like you could at least go and see like, hey, are any modules on my 60 fleet IIS environment failing to load? And that's something probably worthy to just hunt and look into. Maybe an adversary had attempted to load something and it failed. This is a cool tip off. And you can see it's still running 645,000.
Oh, your slides out or your screenshots out of date. That one's only got 69,000 attempted or failed attempts to
Oh my
load.
gosh. Yeah, I should update
That's
that.
phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a crap ton. It's just like constant. Yeah, that's amazing. And this is the 4104 script block. This is looking for the get web config property or set item property. All you elite atomic hacksaws out there trying to bypass or evade my logic. It does attempt to identify someone disabling HTTP logging, watching you. Ship that PR. And then I don't think this is pulling in yet either, but this is just yet again. Oh, there it is. Looking for a new web global module being ran in my environment. So if you're collecting script block, or if you haven't seen script block logging from PowerShell 4104, this is quite the money for any org or for any, SIM vendor or anything like that. 4104 is quite magical for PowerShell. And yeah, you see all our new modules.
And if your EDR doesn't collect script load data, you should go yell at them and tell them to give you that, because it's an absolute treasure mine of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's money. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of flip again, showing a little bit more. I had better screenshots from prior stuff. So this is just app command adding a new module. Very verbose, and you can see all my Metasploit attempts. I'm like, why is this not working? And I was pushing buttons, and anything will go. Here's the 4104, a little bit more noisier, showing me trying to figure out all the help because I have no idea what I'm doing. And then here's those IIS op logs. And so you'll see, hopefully you can see that you'll see them being updated, and the name on the top ones are like test and different things like that. So yeah, you should actually, I think that's the site is test, because I had a test site that I was playing with. So, but overall, like, I don't know, the log's okay. It's not going to find APT, but you'll see changes happening. And maybe that's what we need, right? Is just being able to monitor for changes. And that's worth enough of a digging into.
If I think of these IIS servers potentially being systematically the same,
yep,
it's interesting if only one gets it and another doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Or, two get it out of the 30, right? Like, why is there variance? So I think that's kind of an interesting aspect too, of like, if I expect 10 of these to have the same thing, why don't I have 10 of these updates versus I only have one thing suspicious, right? That's kind of an interesting key in too. So not great, but there are options. And again, it's totally just going to become environment based. I'd be curious if somebody does have a fleet of like 500 IIS servers, if what that potentially looks like, and you're logging all this type of stuff.
Yeah, that would definitely be the more true test of these kind of things, and inventorying. I actually just added it to the last slide. I'll show it in a sec. Here's my 69,000 times module failing. Not as good as the new one. And then this is that script input, inventorying all my modules, which we did see, which is cool. So mitigations, right? Obvious one is patching your web apps. Like if you're hosting crap apps, you're going to get pop apps. The very simple architecture mitigation, making sure your servers are sitting in like a DMZ, which probably happens for the most part. Unless you're a small org, it's the server under Bob's desk and the development
Flat
department.
network.
Yep. Flat network is,
Service accounts, domain admin, the usual
Yeah.
standard day-to-day operations,
Yep. That's how we roll. You got to make it work. There's no time to chase errors. I guess in one of my prior orgs, we had one of our many companies. They had a decent DMZ. It was pretty restricted. The servers were not allowed to egress out to the internet themselves. They were only allowed to just talk with the sessions that were created, which was actually pretty cool. They also had, at the time, it was called Bit9 for application control. It's whatever new name now by VMware or Carbon Black. But the Bit9 app itself was solid. Like, we would see things drop and nothing would happen, right? Because it wasn't able to load up because it was a new binary. And we don't allow that in high enforcement. So that was really cool. I've seen great success with some web application firewalls, and then and success with like a next gen firewall. I don't know if they're called next gen anymore, but like a Palo Alto firewall, things like that.
Everything's next gen these days.
Yeah, XGN, and that's the new one, right?
Extended. Yep.
Yeah.
Extended next gen.
Yep, I've seen decent success with Palo Alto. They got good SIGs, and try to prevent first. I mean, that's the kind of the obvious goal: prevent first. But at the same time, you can only put so much in front of your Exchange server and SharePoint until it blocks your CEO from loading that doc that he really needs. That has like 18 macros embedded and all that stuff.
And just like anything, it's only as good as the controls you put in place of it. So just because like application control is not going to be the silver bullet, right? You start adding exclusions, those exclusions compound, you nest it wrong, you might as well have not even put it into place, right? So that's the other aspect of some of these, right? Like everybody's just like, oh, just go buy X and go buy Y.
Yeah.
And they're difficult to implement, especially if you're an already existing org structure that's large. Application deployment is not, control is not going to be easy. But it is definitely worthwhile the investment, because once it's going, it's running. It's right. It's the initial upfront cost. Like, if you can make that work and make those business use cases, huge advantages. And organizations that I work with that have application control in place and that have actually gone and implemented it post deployment of basically building out the environment, huge success. So definitely not something to sleep on, especially with new tools like Airlock, WDAC, Sleep, Carbon Black, or VMware still has their application control. Haven't played with it or used it in a few years, but that's still going around. It's another contender for good application control.
Yeah, definitely like WDAC or whatnot. I was just kind of thinking, I was like, even if you just implemented a simple policy on your front end IIS servers out there, I was thinking about like allow listing certain directories. If you allowed listed all of the inet serve, most from my Googlings, most adversaries are dropping in different paths. They're not dropping in inet serve, their DLL, to load up as a new module. So even if you had to make it work, right, you're just like, allow inet serve, allow it. Like, you might end up finding everything works fine until someone tries to load a module from that non-standard path and you start getting errors and things like that. Then at least you know it works, right? But
yeah, and even
audit first.
Yeah, audit mode. That's like stage one of any time you're looking at application control or deployment or things like WDAC is audit mode, right? To understand what the potential impact is before just blasting it out. The other aspect is, okay, while there is an inherent risk in just allow listing an entire directory, hashes, specific file names, right? The combination of those to enable those versus just a blanket list also helps kind of cut that down. Again, it's going to be really dependent, but I like the aspect of, okay, let's just focus on the core front end IIS servers before just trying to deploy WDAC out. And that's honestly what I would do internally too. You start out small, specific OUs, specific servers or instances, and kind of just figure it out as we go. Makes the eating that frog, so to speak, a lot easier.
Yes, I love that. The one line you don't see on this screen is I wrote it just last second, but it was just inventorying your modules, just knowing what's out there. I think that's, if you get one thing out of here, I hope you get that adversaries are abusing IIS modules, and now you need to go and understand what modules are installed in your environment. That's all I want anybody to get out of this. It's like, what is happening with my servers? That's it. Yeah, I think, I guess beyond all that, thank you so much. Thanks y'all for hanging out and listening. And we will get our repo ready. I think we just have to click a couple buttons.
Turn them public, and then
yeah,
I need to convert our notes and PR them. But we have two repos, one for the notes and slides, and then we will also have a repo for tools and scripts that we utilize on the Atomics on a Friday as well. So that way you make it easy, so you don't have to try and screenshot or remember. And then also potentially a website coming real soon as well. Centralize all of it, make it easy for everybody to come back and get what you need.
Yep, that'll be awesome. But
Logo had to come first.
Yeah, most important thing.
Priorities.
Yeah. Nick, we'll have stickers before we have the site actually going to the repo.
Yeah, or those repos even turn public. Those stickers are probably on their way right now.
Yep. Got no time to do web stuff.
Yeah, we have day jobs like logo and sticker development.
Yeah. And our marketing team will get on properly notifying folks a week ahead of time before we have the next Atomic on a Friday.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in becoming the marketing team here, let us know. The DMs are open.
That too. Yes. So, but yeah, thanks, man. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks everybody, and thanks for jamming. This is a lot of great research from y'all on this. It's good stuff.
Yes. So until then,
we'll catch you.
What's our next? Do you know what our next topic is? You know what we're doing? What are we doing next?
No, it's on the schedule though. So if you have the schedule open, it's in there. It's 2 weeks out, I think. So we'll be back. I think we're doing an actual full emulation plan again.
Oh, cool.
Similar to last time. A little more strategic, so it should be interesting, I think.
Good.
And more tools and scripts to go with it as well.
Excellent.
And maybe some new atomics. We'll find out.
Yes. Love it. Awesome.
Thanks for jamming.
Thank you.
Catch you next time.
Have fun. Bye.